I currently work at Starbucks and have worked there for nearly a year. I'm a part-time employee and work all kinds of hours that were open the Starbucks location that I work at. I would describe as an average location. It's near a shopping area with some other stores and restaurants nearby. This is a story of something that scared me a lot, and it happened several months ago. On this day in particular, I was working a closing shift, and when I started, I think it was about 12. We closed at 8 p.m., so it was an 8-hour shift, and we generally were not too busy in the afternoon until about 4 or 5, and things would get kind of busy for a few hours by 7. The place was usually very quiet. Again, I remember that the first few hours on this day went by sort of slow because things weren't very busy inside the Starbucks. There are quite a few tables that people of 10 come in and work it on their laptops or read books. There were a few people that got coffee as they worked, or studied. By 5 o'clock things were busy. It was around that time that I first saw a man inside that was acting sort of strange. I remember that he had a full beard that was not incredibly long, but a decent length. He was balding and wore baggy clothes. The guy started walking around really quickly. Inside, it looked like he was walking fast to go someplace, but then he would just turn around and walk back soon. It seemed as though he was speed walking laps around the store. It was strange to say the least. After about a minute or so that he stopped, and it appeared as though he went to talk with someone that was sitting down. I had work to do, and I got sort of busy for the next little stretch of time. Probably 30 minutes or so later, I heard that some of the customers were complaining about the guy. I looked out, and he was still there now. He was sitting at a table by himself and just kind of looking around. Apparently, he had approached several customers asking them to buy him something or give him their drinks because I was the least busy at the time. After talking with the coworker, I decided to ask the guy to leave. I was nervous to do so because I didn't know how the man would react. I walked out from behind the counter and towards where I had seen him. It was still pretty busy and people were all over the place. This Starbucks, I feel like, is a little bit larger than most. When I got over to where I had seen the guy sitting before he was now gone, I looked around and walked through the entire place. I couldn't find him anywhere though. I guessed that I had left. This was actually our leaf to me, and I went back to behind the counter. I returned to work making drinks after that, but it was maybe between 6 and 7 p.m. Things quickly died down inside and got much quieter. A few of my coworkers left at 7, and there were just 4 of us working for the last hour. When I would work closing shifts, the 7 o'clock hour always seemed to dragon. It was very quiety, pickly a tour location. Plus, usually, it had been a long day to that point. We didn't get a whole lot of customers. Either finally 8 o'clock came, nobody else was inside at any of the tables. I walked out to clean the floor like one of you always did. At closing time, when I got over to the back area where the bathrooms were though, I noticed that the door was closed to one of them. We had 2 bathrooms right across from each other. In this small little back hallway area, they were both single-room bathrooms with a locking door. When nobody was inside of them, they would be open. I remember the man, and instantly my heart sank. Could it possibly be in there? It was like I just knew till I knocked on the door, but I got no response. I waited for a bit and then knocked again. This time I said that we were closing, and I asked if anybody was inside. I got no response to that as well. I started to think that possibly somebody had just closed the door and then left. I knocked again and asked if anybody was inside, and I listened closely. I was listening for any kind of movement or indication of somebody being in there, but I heard absolutely nothing. It took a couple of steps back, and then out of nowhere the door burst up, and sure enough, the man from before came running out, and he was running right towards me. I could run away from him. My co-workers heard the commotion and saw me running. I ran all the way out of the building, though when I made it outside, the man was probably about 10 feet behind. He followed me out. I sprinted through the parking lot and didn't know exactly where I was going. I couldn't get inside my car in time before the man would reach me, so instead I ran through the parking lot to another one where there was like a grocery store. I ran all the way to the grocery store and went inside of it. Thankfully, they were still open. At some point, the man stopped chasing me, but I honestly don't know when. All I know is when I got inside the grocery store, I didn't see him anymore. One of my coworkers was calling me on my cell phone, and I answered. She asked me if I was okay and also mentioned that they had called the police. I said that I was fine, but I didn't know where the man was anymore. Very carefully, I walked back to Starbucks. As I did, I kept Taney out for the man, but I didn't see him. When I made it back, there was a police car outside. Well, talked with officers, and they said they would search around the area for the man finished up or work. Then all left. It made for the scariest day I ever had working there. Story number 2, I went to Starbucks last month and had the work experience there of my life. The thing is, I've gone there probably 100 times before. I'm a big coffee drinker, and I have coffee every day before work and throughout the workday as well. I don't stop at Starbucks every day. Sometimes I make coffee at home, other times you gotta different coffee places. It just depends on a lot of things. This time though, I was going to Starbucks. As I pulled into the parking lot, the line for the drive-thru was extremely long because of this. I decided to walk inside thinking maybe it would be faster. However, when I got inside, I noticed at least 10 people were there. There was a line of about 3 or 4 to order, and the rest were waiting to pick up the drinks that they had already ordered. The employees all seemed very busy, constantly making drinks and taking orders for both the customers inside and the drive-thru line at this time in the morning. Imagine that it's always busy like that. I had made my decision though, so I stuck to it and got in the back of the line. As I was waiting in line, a couple of people came inside and minutes went by, and soon it was my turn, and I ordered, then I made my way to the people who were waiting for their drinks. There was probably 4 or 5 other people there. When I got there, soon one of the drinks was done, and one of the people picked it up and left. I waited there for about 3 or 4 minutes as other people periodically got their drinks. I figured that mine had to be the next one because now everybody else was around me waiting had ordered theirs after me. There were still about 5 of us. There I was actually getting a little bit concerned because I really needed to be getting to work. I didn't expect it to take this long to get my drink. Finally, one of the Starbucks employees put a drink down and said, "My name is," should mention that my name is Jessica, and the drink was clearly what I had ordered, the same size and everything. I started to walk over to get the drink, but a woman cut in front of me. Immediately she had just ordered and wasn't even right behind me in the line. There's no way that this was her drink. I was in sort of disbelief as I watched her pick up the drink and start to walk out. I followed her and stopped her just before the exit. It told her that it thought that was my drink. She turned to me and had aerially angry look on her face and told me no, it was hers. It told her that my name was Jessica and I had ordered before her, and this was exactly what I had ordered as well. The woman claimed that her name was Jessica and she was in a big hurry. I asked her what it was that she ordered because I didn't believe her. She just said this as she held out the drink to me. She didn't even say the name of it, which made me doubt Revan more. Then she started to walk out. I didn't want to go and ask for them to make me another drink and tell them the situation. The employees seemed far too busy to even notice, and I didn't want to be late for work. I told the woman, "Fine, take it then," and I walked out behind her and headed for my car. I would just make a pot of coffee later when I got to work. It really wasn't that big of a deal. Still, the fact that this woman had cut in front of Medican my drink and been so rude about it made me angry. To my surprise, though, when I arrived at my vehicle, the woman who took my drink was now right behind. She said to me, "How dare I accuse her of stealing my drink?" She went on to say that she hadn't stolen a thing in her life. I told the woman that I had to leave, and I didn't have time to argue with her. She started to say more to me, but I ignored it and just got inside of my car. I shut the door as she continued talking. When this happened, the woman then said, "Here, take your stupid drinks." She then removed the light and dumped the whole thing on my windshield. I was shocked. I didn't know what to do before I could say anything. The woman was storming off in the other directional. I could was turn on my windshield wipers and then drive off. The whole experience really blew my mind. That how rude some people can be. I got to the end of the parking lot, merged back onto the road. It was busy, and I had to wait for a little while. During that time, I saw a car driver right up and slam on its brakes right behind me and then start honking. I could see that the same woman was behind the wheel. I really didn't know what her problem was. When I finally merged onto the road, she went right behind me and proceeded to follow my car at an extremely close distance, even honking at me few times. This went for several miles before finally she swerved around me, flipping me off in the process. She then sped away and out of my sight. I got to work and made coffee. Although I didn't even need it, thought the woman stole me coffee. The confrontation really woke me up for the day. I didn't go back to that Starbucks for a while, but I have been back since. I haven't seen that woman, but hopefully she doesn't do something like that again to anybody else. Story number 3, I'm a female, and this happened a few years ago when I was in college. It was during finals week at the end of the school year. Had lots of studying to do to get ready for my final exams. There was a Starbucks between my apartment that I shared with my roommate in campus. I occasionally went there to study because I could focus better than a tour apartment. Drinking some caffeine would also help me focus. Typically one day, entered the Starbucks off campus later in the morning. Things were pretty quiet because it was after the morning rush. There were a few people on laptops and stuff, and I brought mine as well as some school notes and books. I sat down at a table, got my stuff out, and then went up and ordered a drink. Then I got to work studying for some of my exams. Probably an hour or two later, I was still there, and going strong, I was very focused and not really paying that much attention to my surroundings. That's when seemingly out of nowhere man approached. He was tall, sort of thin, and much older than I was at the time. He waved at me briefly as she stood there on the other side of the table. I was asked me what I was doing, and it told him that I was studying for my final exams. The man then asked if he could buy me drink. I told him nah thanks and smiled politely. Then I pointed to the drink that I already had. The guy said, "You're finished though." I had, in fact, finished it, but the cup was not see-through. So I'm not sure how we knew that. I told him that I didn't want another one though, and I was good. Stood there for a few moments and then just kind of walked away. I looked back at my laptop, but then looked up again a few seconds later to see where he went. Sat down in the corner across from me, but a decent ways away. After sitting down, he immediately looked up in my direction, and I looked back at my laptop from the non. I looked up here and there, and I caught the man staring at me several more times soon. I decided to leave because it was causing me to not focus as well. I had a good amount of studying done though. I left and went back to my apartment. I didn't have any more classes for the days, so I stayed at my place. My roommate got back later that night, and I continued to do some more studying in my room. I had an exam the next morning, and another one the following day at about 10 p.m. I decided to go to bed. As I was getting ready, there was a knock on the front door of our apartment. I assumed it was probably somebody there, former roommate, possibly one of her friends. My roommate and I got along well, but I never knew all of her plans. I didn't think too much of it until she came over to me and Mef had invited anybody over. It told her no, and she then said that some guy was standing outside of our door. Went over to the kitchen where the front door opened up to. I looked through the little hole to the hallway, and the same guy was standing there. I jumped back when a Zoemi roommate asked me who he was, and I told her about earlier in the day. I had no idea how. The Mango Tour address, we'd not answer the door. He knocked again several more times into Tall. He stayed there for probably about 10 minutes, and it felt like forever. Finally he left. I went to B. Then luckily the guy didn't come back that night. Following morning, I took one of my exams and returned home to study for the exam. I had the next day, this time when my roommate was gone and I was home by myself at about 5 p.m. There was again a knocking on the front door. I walked over and looked to find the man there again. This time he was more persistent. The way he knocked was louder than before and faster. It was like he knew that I was home and was frustrated that I wasn't answering. Then he ventured opening up the door, which was locked. He's terrified. What if he tried breaking in or something? I called my roommate and told her that the guy was back. She was on her way home, and I didn't want there to run into him. He stayed there standing outside the door, but didn't knock. Again, he just stood there for a really long time. I kept watching, hoping that he would leave. After at least 10 more minutes, she finally did. I told my roommate that he was gone, and soon after she got back home, but neither of us felt safe there. Luckily, we had some friends who had a college house not too far away, and we ended up going there to spend the night. They had enough space for us, and we were both afraid that the man would return again when we stayed at our friend's place. The guy didn't show up there. In fact, I only had to be at college for 2 more days, and I stayed at the same house the whole time. I just didn't want to go back to our apartment. My parents then came up during the day to help me move out of the apartment. I'm sure that the man probably returned, but at least they didn't break in. I still don't know how I knew where we lived, though he must have followed me back, which really creeps me out, but I had no idea. I'm just happy that I haven't seen the guy. Since story number 4, I used to work at a Starbucks coffee shop a few years ago. I only worked there for a couple of months. One night, he was approaching closing time, and I was working with one other coworker. I don't remember exactly when we closed, but I think it was like 8 or 9 p.m. There was one other customer inside who had been there for a while. He was sitting at a table working on his laptop and drinking a coffee. Let them know that we would be closing soon, and he assured us that he would be out by then. The Starbucks location that I worked at was a little quieter. It wasn't located right immediately next to anything else and was kind of by itself. There was no strip mall or other stores right there, but there were a couple of miles down the road. When we had 5 minutes before we closed, suddenly somebody appeared at one of the front windows. It was a man wearing a creepy-looking alien mask. I was the first to see him, and I made a comment to my coworker. We also saw the guy. We laughed at first and assumed it was someone just being silly. Still, I'm not going to lie, I had a sort of bad feeling. The guy then banged on the window a few times really loudly. The way that he pounded on it was so loud. I was almost surprised that the glass didn't break. It no longer seemed like a completely harmless joke. The man inside on his laptop now looked over and made a comment like, "What the heck is that?" The man outside then pressed his face and hands right up against the window and stared in a tush. She was pretty far to me left, and I was fairly close to the entrance doors. I walked over and said that I was going to lock the doors now because we were closing in 3 minutes, and I didn't know what this guy was up to. Then I walked over and did so. The man in the alien mask remained where he was and kept looking inside. I heard my coworker and the customer talking to each other. A bit they were wondering what the guy outside wanted and where he came from, because we could see just about the whole parking lot from the windows. The only cars there were my coworkers, the customers, and mine. After I locked the doors, I went back over to behind the counter with my coworker. Will watched the man as she kept looking in for about another minute or so. Then he walked over to the doors and tried entering, except the doors were now locked. He then banged on them a few times. I walked over and yelled at the guy that we were closed, and I asked him what he wanted. He didn't respond, but remained standing there blocking the doors. The customer inside the store had now packed up his laptop. Then he said, "I know you guys are closed now, but I'm not leaving with that guy standing there." We told him it was okay, and we weren't going to leave either until the guy in the alien mask moved. All we could do was wait. About 5 more minutes went by. Now this was getting ridiculous. I decided to walk over to the door and yell out to the guy again. This time I asked him to leave, but as soon as I started walking over, the man began to pound loudly on the door. It said that we would have to call the police if he didn't leave. I really didn't want to, but I didn't know who else to get them out of the re. When I moved away from the door, he finally stopped banging on it. Then he went back to his stance of hissing his face and hands against the glass window. Will just kind of watched him and waited it out. Probably 5 minutes later, when I was strongly considering calling the police, he finally left. All of a sudden, he just stood up and walked off. We were all more than happy to see this. The customer then left as well, followed parking lot and property, but didn't see the guy anywhere. None of us knew exactly where he had. Soon all of us, my coworker, were pretty quick to leave. However, I'm telling my mom about what had just happened. Before I drove home, all of a sudden, I looked up and the same guy was standing about 10 feet away and approaching my vehicle. I was stead no time, and I got out of the rees fast as I could. Actually sprinted after Mekissing met at the end of the parking lot. Luckily, he never caught me and I got away. I never saw the man again. I still wonder though what his intentions were. Was she just some prankster that took things a little bit too far, or would he have harmed us? I'm glad I didn't have to find out though. Story number 5. This story takes place one sunny Saturday morning when I went to Starbucks to get some coffee. I'm a female, and during the time of this story I was about 18 and lived with my parents, who lived in a pretty standard neighborhood, and the local Starbucks was just a 5-minute drive away. I don't remember what time it was exactly when I got there, but I went inside and ordered what I usually did. The inside of the shop was pretty typical. A few people's at around edibles. I spent maybe 5 minutes to toll inside after getting my drink. I left and walked into the parking lot, towed my cart, then I started it up and began driving home. The Starbucks was on the edge of a residential area where we lived. As soon as I pulled out of the parking lot, this one car pulled out right behind me. I thought nothing of it until it turned at the next street and the car behind me did the same. The turn that the car made was very sharp and sudden. It made me take note of it. I continued to go home. When I got a street, the car turned onto it with me still. I thought there was no chance it was following me. I pulled into our driveway. Our street was quiet, but people drove by all the time. When I pulled into the driveway, the car behind me slowed down significantly. Still, it didn't follow me into the driveway, and it didn't stop. It kept towing down the street. I went for that and forgot all about the situation. I figured that it was all a coincidence, but fast forward to hours later, I didn't have anything going on and was at home for the entire day. When night came, I was nominated by my brother to pick up pizza that we ordered for the night. I left the house and started driving to the pizza place, which was a little bit farther away than Starbucks was. After backing out of the driveway, I started going down our street and once again saw the same car driving behind me. I couldn't believe it. It came from just past our house. This started to really confuse me. I wondered who it was that was driving the car. I didn't recognize it at all. When I got a street up, it suddenly took a left, then it took another left when I had made it a ways down that street. Eventually, I would loop back around to my street and drive past our house. When I got our street, I speed up and then went back into our driveway and pulled in. The car was still behind me a little ways back. I got as far up to our house as I could get, then I got out and sprinted up the front yard to our door. As I got back inside the house, I saw the car had sped away. On the street again, I told my dad what had happened and mentioned how I had been followed earlier as well. We went outside to take a look, but whoever it was long gone. There wasn't much we could do, but my dad went and got the pizza instead of me. He said that he didn't see the car at all during his drive. I didn't leave the house by myself for the next few days, but when I did, everything was fine. I never saw the car again. I still wonder though who was driving and why they were following.